Welcome back to the 10 Adventures podcast. Today we're talking about the Camino de Santiago, specifically one of the lesser-known routes, the Via de la Plata, which goes from Seville to Santiago. Here on the podcast is John Hayes, who wrote the book on cycling, the Ruta Via de la Plata. Hi, John. Welcome back.
Hi, Richard.
We talked a little while ago about your incredible walking journey on the E4, and we didn't get into what led you to writing a guidebook on the Via de la Plata. So I'm interested, how do you go and become a guidebook author?
Well, to be honest, it started with the experience of the E4. So I had to do a lot of research to make the E4 happen, working out where the route was, where I could stop. And I enjoyed that research. And then when I was actually on the walk, I was blogging. And so I enjoyed that process as well. So after finishing it, it seemed like a sort of natural thing to then start writing a guidebook. I also, when I was on the E4, about the third day in actually, I met this man, John Haldego, who who was also walking the same route, and but in the other direction. It just turned out that he was an unbelievable expert in all things Spanish walking, and he's walked every single GR route in the whole of Spain, an enormous encyclopedia of walks. And he got interested in a few minutes in what I was doing, and we became best friends. And we walked many routes together after that. And he recommended my first route, which was the GR1, which goes all the way across northern Spain. And he said this is a great route. It's his favourite route. And on the back of his recommendation and his support, I took a proposal to Cicerone, who are the biggest guidebook writers in the UK, and one of the biggest in the world, I think, in terms of the English language, and put the idea to them, and they took it up. Maybe with hindsight, it wasn't such a brilliant idea because it was such a big walk. It was a 55-day walk all the way across Spain, and took me 2 years to write, and an enormous amount of effort. But that's what kicked me off, and ever since then, I've been writing guidebooks.
That's incredible. Now, as a guidebook writer, I'm sure it's not the same as just being someone who's out doing the trail. You know, can you still enjoy the walk or the bike when you're working on the guidebook, or is it every day you're constantly trying to get information to create a comprehensive guide?
Some people write a lot more guidebooks than I write. Some people can, there's one or two people can actually go and write a guidebook almost on the move. But I'm steady, if you like. I tend to do as much research as possible before I go on the route, on the walk. I only do walks I want to do. I don't do them because I think they might be popular. So I spend some time either walking the route or exploring the area or taking a recommendation before I decide that this is going to work. So I mean, there's guides I could have written, but I decided they were just not exciting enough, and turned them down. So I tend, the sort of steps I go through once I've agreed with Cicerone that this is a walk I want to do, and they're willing to publish a guide for. I try and get the route defined digitally, so it's on a map, on a digital map. So I know where it's going to go, and that's not always straightforward. So some routes are better defined than others. Some routes have already got a GPX file, and some routes you just have to produce that for yourself from the original maps. But I try and get that done first. I sort of then use that to produce a data set of all the things I need to do, the pictures I need to take, the bits of interest along the way. So when I actually go and walk it, I'm really confirming in a way what some of the stuff I'd already researched. I'm filling the bits in, taking the pictures, recording times, finding obstacles, finding the bits which aren't really very nice, and I'm going to sort of recommend a detour around. So it's a different thing walking it to researching it, and there's still usually an awful lot of pleasure in actually walking it as well as doing the research. And then you get home and you have to write it. A lot more research, obviously. You write the first draft. My wife then goes through it and fills in all the grammar I've missed out and corrects my English. And then I submit it to Cicerone. They assign an editor. The editors are brilliant, and they put it into the format for their publishing system. And 6 to 9 months later, out pops a book. So it's it's a process. I mean, they produce lots of books every year, so they've got a very well oiled machine for doing that.
Let's talk a little bit about the Via de la Plata. What drew you to that route?
The route of Via de la Plata is actually it's a Roman road. So I mean, when you talked about it being a Camino, it actually predates the Camino. So it was already there as a route. The reason I decided to do it was I was actually on a longer route, a longer trip, Eurovelo 1, which is this network of European cycling routes. And I cycled down the Portuguese coast, beautiful cycle ride, then cycled across to Seville on the Eurovelo 1. And then you join at Seville, you join the route of Via de la Plata. So I then cycled that route. And I just thought it was such a brilliant route. It's an amazing route. And so I blogged about it. And as a consequence of blogging about it, there's an association in Spain, the Ruta Via de la Plata Association, which consists of all of the councils along the route who come together to promote the route. They got in touch with me and they said they liked my blog, and would I be interested in helping them promote the route. And I then thought this is a good opportunity to do a guide. So I then approached Cicerone with the idea of a guide. Cicerone had already done a walking guide to the Camino, but it's very old, out of date, and it was the Camino. The Ruta Via de la Plata Association really is not about the Camino. It's about the original Roman route, which goes from Merida, which is just north of Seville, all the way to the north coast. But Cicerone, understandably, wanted me to write about it from the perspective of pilgrims, as well as the Roman road. So my guide has actually got two routes. One which goes to Santiago, and one which goes to Gijon on the north coast. It's the same route for 2/3 of the way, but if you want to be a pilgrim and be part of this huge network of pilgrim routes which exist in Spain, you can follow my route all the way to Santiago, cycle my route to Santiago del Compostela. But if you want to do the original Roman route, you follow it to Gijon on the north coast.
I did not realize that the Via de la Plata was a Roman route. I have always just associated with the Camino. The Cicerone folks know what they're doing, because that's what drew me, probably 20 years ago, to picking up guidebooks on this route. It just seems so spectacular.
Well, it's a really interesting thing. I mean, the word Camino, as hikers associate Camino with pilgrimages to Santiago del Compostela, but Camino just means track or path or road in Spanish. But it's been sort of captured by the industry of pilgrimages to Santiago, and it's an interesting thing. And the Ruta Via de la Plata, of course, existed. It was originally a Roman road. It was then used by the Muslims or the Visigoths first, after the Romans left, and then used by the Muslims, and then used by the Spaniards again after Reconquest. And it's a slightly controversial thing whether what plata means. So some people say it means silver, and so but most people think it means pavement, and it's the Arabic word plata being the Arabic word for paved road. So, of course, a lot of its time it was under Arabic control. I mean, the original Camino, it's called the French route, goes across northern Spain, and that was the part of Spain which wasn't controlled by the Arabs. Most of Spain below the Cantabrian Mountains was controlled by the Arabs until the 13th century. And so the Camino, the Ruta Verde de la Plata, couldn't be used by pilgrims because it was part of the Muslim part of Spain. So it became adopted by pilgrims as a way of getting to Santiago. It was already there before the pilgrims started to use it.
I love we're getting history information, John. This is so much fun just learning and hearing about European history. Let's dig into a little bit about this route. And so for people that are going to ride it, can you give kind of an overview of length and services and kind of all the things people might be wondering to see if they could actually do this route?
It's a very good guide, the guide I produce. It's a very clever guide, I think. I'm really quite proud of it, because what I've tried to do with a guide is produce a route which makes the journey accessible for as many different sorts of cyclists as possible. Because there's an enormous range of cyclists. You can be a road cyclist on a carbon bike, or you can be a mountain biker on a suspended bike, and or you can be a host of people in between, touring cyclists. And what I've tried to do with the guide is make the trip useful for all types of cyclists. So you can actually cycle all the way to either Gijon or Santiago on a metalled surface. Typically, pilgrims go on an off-road surface. There's some road surfaces even for pilgrims. Typically, a pilgrim goes on an off-road surface, but some of the off-road stretches are not as interesting as other parts of it. So what I've tried to do is produce a guide which gives you the best of both worlds. So for touring cyclists like me, I consider myself a touring cyclist. I've devised a route which follows the original route, but doesn't take you on the really dull bits. So if you pick up the guide, you can pick and choose between, depending on what sort of cyclist you are, and define your own route for each day. If you go to Santiago, it's just over 1,000 kilometers. And you can do that I've divided that into 15 days. If you go to Gijon on the north coast, it's just under 1,000 kilometers and 14 days. And at the end of each day, you arrive at a town, mostly a historic town, particularly on the Gijon route. You're arriving at significant historic towns. There's 9 UNESCO World Heritage Sites along the route.
Oh, wow.
So you're arriving at towns which are famous for the Roman heritage, towns which are famous for Muslim heritage. Every sort of historic centre is available on the route, and as I said, you can cycle it off-road, a mix of off-road and on-road, or entirely on-road.
Now, you mentioned at the very start a metalled surface, and I remember when I first lived in the UK. It blew me away, coming from Canada. I didn't realize that metalled didn't mean actual metal roads. For all the North Americans, can you explain
Yes.
a metalled road?
I think the term metal means it's been finished with a roller. That's where the term metal comes from. It means, let me think, a tarmac road, a hard surface, a standard road. which has had some metal rolling on it to produce that sort of metal finish. And obviously, if you're on a road bike, you want a metalled road. But if you're not on a road bike, you're a bit more flexible. That's the interesting thing about Spain is in the last 20 years they've had the most incredible upgrade to their infrastructure. So the route to Villa de Plata is basically follows a very significant transport corridor, particularly as it goes west. So along that transport corridor, you'll be following within the corridor. There's brand new motorways and brand new railway lines. They've got the whole new railway network in Spain at the moment. And as a consequence, the old road network, which was beautifully graded was designed to take lorries over mountains, trucks, I think you say in America, big vehicles over mountains. This original infrastructure still exists, but it's not used by anybody. So you have roads which we would in the UK would be full of traffic, in Spain are just empty. So there's the option to cycle along these beautiful empty roads. You can look down these things. I guess you're used to it in Canada. Seeing an empty road is such a novelty for us in the UK, but they exist in Spain, and they're there to cycle along. So you can cycle along these very quiet, very safe, but quite substantial roads, or you can cycle on the off-road tracks. There's a long explanation of metals.
Actually, you answered one of my questions, which was the question people always ask is how much traffic is there? And it sounds like, Spain is fantastic because you have this road network that you aren't dealing with big trucks or cars constantly going by, and makes it a really nice bike tour.
There's a bit of traffic when you leave Seville, and there's a bit of traffic when you on a slightly ugly bit of traffic on the way into Leon, but there's not very much. I mean, there's large stretches. I've got some wonderful photographs of when I first cycled it. I cycled it with my wife, just staring down this empty road in the sun. It's just amazing. And it is. It's very, very quiet. Very quiet.
You talked a bit about the off-road, and I'm really interested. Off-road has such a wide meaning from, kind of a gravel road you can go on to single track that's quite technical. What does off-road on this route mean?
I would say there's nothing really technical, because technical tends to be associated with hills, going down a hill or up a hill. So what you've got on the you climb about 500 meters on your first day, but a very gradual climb. Then after that, you're on what's called the meseta in Spain, and so it's just gentle ups and downs. It's not steep, and so there's just one or two bits which are uncomfortable and are technical, and I simply say, well, don't go on them unless you really want, unless you're obsessed by the need to follow the pilgrim route all the way. Which some people want to, because they want to be a fully fledged pilgrim, but unless you really, really want to do that, all of the technical bits, and I think probably 3 or 4% of the whole journey you could call technical, are easily avoided, and I recommend that you do avoid them when I think they're seriously uncomfortable. So what I've designed the guide for is to enable people to design their own route. I mean, the worst comes to the worst, you can find a very comfortable road route as an alternative. So if you find the off-road a bit uncomfortable, then just join the road. But it's not uncomfortable. It's typically a sandy track, what we'd call an agricultural route in the UK. Something which would be used by vehicles or shepherds, that sort of thing. and some of it is absolutely spectacular in terms of the scenery and landscape. I'm going to talk about that later on, perhaps.
And one other question about the off-road portion. Are you sharing that with walkers? Is it something where you have to be aware there could be individuals walking it and it's, can be congested? Or is it still, there's so few people that you don't have to worry about, turning a corner and running into a group of pilgrims?
It's the latter. It's the latter. I think it's the third most popular pilgrim route. So you've got the main route, the Camino Frances, which runs from west to east, and then you've got the Camino Portuguese. They are much more, much busier. And when you get near Santiago, it is a bit of an issue if you're a cyclist. I mean, but on the route to Via de la Plata, it's never an issue. It's you can see the pilgrims a long way out, and they can see you a long way out, and you see quite a few, but it's not crowded in the same way as those other two routes are.
Now, we've talked a lot about kind of the logistics and the type of services to ride on, but for people who are just thinking, what am I going to see on this route? What makes this such a special route, in your opinion?
The thing I think is the thing which is totally special about the route and compares. I don't think there's another route, unless it's been particularly sort of constructed to take you all over the place to find special places. There's not another route which is so direct, going from A to B, which visits such fantastic places. So from a visiting perspective, places where you see historic sites, it's just amazing, because you start in Seville, which is it's just an incredible place with its Roman, Muslim and Spanish heritage. Then you go to Zafra, then Merida. Merida is the best place in Spain for Roman remains. There's a huge aqueduct and a Colosseum and theatre and all the rest of it. And it just carries on. Every single place you go to is special. Cáceres is where they film most of the Game of Thrones. Leon has the best stained glass of any city in Spain, and the cathedral is just incredible. So it's just this concentration of Spanish history, and Spanish history is very interesting because of its Muslim heritage as well as its Roman and Christian heritage. It's very interesting. But then, in terms of the cycling itself, it's also very interesting. You've got this. You've got the whole series of different landscapes, and the landscapes interestingly reflect the history of the Reconquest. So in the north, it's where the Reconquest was much slower, the farms are smaller, but in the south, it was more. The farms were massive. These huge agricultural estates, which were there for cattle and pigs, which don't have many people on, but what they did, they planted evergreen oak trees, which are scattered about there's a tree every 30 meters or so, and in between the trees is just, in the spring, is just a sea of flowers, and in the autumn they all the grazing gets burnt off, and you have this sort of ochre-looking landscape with these dark trees on. So it's a very unique landscape in the south. It's called the Dehesa. And cycling through that is just very, very special. We feel very privileged. It's actually, I think it's better to cycle through it than to walk through it, to be honest, because you're going at this sort of nice pace. It's like this film set coming past you as you go along. So the cycling is great. It's very interesting. But at the end of each day, you arrive at this special town, city, where you can absorb the sort of Spanish life and have a great meal, get cleaned up, and then do the people watching, do the sightseeing and the people watching in the Plaza Mayor, where everyone's eating tapas. It's a very special lifestyle. We actually developed a sort of Spanish day for our cycling. You leave at about 9 o'clock, two coffee stops in the morning. Every small village has a place to stop for coffee. I'm a vegetarian now, but at the time I was eating Spanish ham, and every place claims to be the place where Spanish ham was invented. You know, there's even a place where you go to a Spanish ham museum on the way, and so they all make a speciality of toast and ham in the morning and coffee, and then you'd get to your destination in time for lunch, because of course the Spanish eat lunch very late, so you can get to you have your lunch as late as 3 o'clock if they're still serving lunch. So you can then get there, relax over a long Spanish lunch, get cleaned up in your hotel or wherever it is you're staying, do some sightseeing, find everywhere has a Plaza Mayor, the town square, which is where everybody gathers in the evening, and you sit there with a couple of beers and tapas, and that's your day, really. You don't need to have another Spanish meal after all that, and then go round again next day on to another beautiful place.
This sounds incredible, John. This is why cycling in Europe is just so much fun. But the late lunch really kind of is a game changer. I hadn't thought of this before, but being able to kind of do a couple coffee stops, pick up a pastry, and then finish your day at 2 o'clock, and then kind of just be able to chill out. That's so nice. You have your lunch, explore the town. I've never ridden in Spain, but you're really painting an attractive picture.
Yes, yeah, it's amazing. I mean, I cycled in Portugal this year, and I was really disappointed. The Portuguese time isn't the same as Spanish time. They have the same time as we do in the UK, and so you have to get there for 1 o'clock, which is it's a bit of a rush in the morning. But no, it's Spanish is because the cycling is not too difficult. It really isn't. There's the occasional hill you have to climb, but there's nothing savage. It's not like cycling. I mean, for a road cyclist, it might be a bit tame, to be honest. Road cyclists like to have challenging hills to go up. There's nothing like that on this route. So it's a very relaxing, easy journey. And as I said earlier, there's always choices if you want to shorten the day, you can do it. It's not a problem.
Now, in terms of accommodations, does this route have all the ranges from, campgrounds to, nice hotels? Or are there some things you can't do on this route?
Because it's the Camino, you have all of the accommodation options associated with the Camino. So if you're a walking pilgrim, you typically stay in an auberge, which is like a hostel, really. Historically, these places were free, but they're no longer free. But I guess the nearest thing you would compare them to would be some sort of youth hostel. They're all often they have communal accommodation. They always have washing machines and all that sort of stuff. And all the towns have the equivalent as well. Because you're cycling, the amount of accommodation you need isn't nearly as great as if you're walking, because you're typically doing 3 days walking in one day cycling, and you're typically staying in towns. So in the towns you can stay in the pilgrim accommodation, or you can stay in Spanish accommodation. Medium range hotels, or the very best hotels there are. I mean, typically there's a big tradition in Spain of converting historic buildings into hotels. They're called paradors, and the route has there's an argument about whether the parador in Leon is the best parador in Spain, or whether the parador in Palencia is the best parador in Spain. But both of them are on the Ruta Via de la Plata, and they're amazing places. They're a little bit old-fashioned in terms of their food, but the buildings are beautiful, and converted palaces, converted monasteries, converted castles, all that sort of thing. So you have a choice of top-end accommodation, but when they say top-end accommodation, we're talking probably €120 a night for two, a double room. So it's not certainly not compared to the UK. Even at the top end, it's not expensive. And then at the auberge end, you're probably talking 15, 20 euros a night. But accommodation in Spain is always good value, and you've got a huge range of accommodation in between, and plenty of it. There's not a problem ever in terms of finding accommodation.
You know, there's nothing better than partway through a big trip just getting a nice hotel and, you know, having the nice smelling shampoo and just getting the grubbiness off of the body. And those Paradors sound incredible. You know, they're all spaced perfectly to, you know, just enjoy a day of luxury, maybe a rest day, and just pamper yourself.
It is. It's really, we tend to try and stay in nice places, to be honest. It's you know, depending on whether I'm on my own or whether I'm with my wife. My wife's, she likes to stay in nice places. So that's because you know, you're staying in all sorts of places normally, but so we like to stay in the Paradors or the other historic converted buildings, and it's such a good choice there.
We haven't talked about the best time of the year to do this. Are there months where it's, you know, too hot or too cold?
Personally, I would avoid going off-road in the winter. I mean, the seasons change every year at the moment, but if it's wet, there's this weird mud in parts of Spain, which is so sticky. I know when I was walking, but if you get the mud on your bike, it's bad. So you really want to avoid the winter if you're going off-road. So I would say the best months are late April, May and June, when you've got a very short, sharp spring in Spain, but really, really spectacular. July and August tend to get hot. It then gets really nice again in September and October, when, you know, you've got this autumn burnt look to the landscape, which I like. And then of course the rains can come in November, and that's when the wettest month is supposed to be November. If you're going on the road, it's not such an issue. You can go, obviously you can go anytime, but Spain is can be quite cold. You know, once you get off the coastal plain, you're typically between 600 and 1,000 meters. It can be very nice, very dry and clear, but it can be you can get caught out by the cold in the winter. So you just something to be aware of. But the best months, I think, are May, June, and September, October.
John, you've obviously explored this area extensively. What's your favorite memory of, doing the rides to, write the guidebook and doing the research? Is there something that's just seared in your mind when you think about this route?
I've already talked about cycling across the Dehesa, and there's a particular place about 4 days into the route where you cycle 30 kilometers, and it's off-road all the time. It's flat, and you've got this beautiful landscape of these evergreen oak trees, these flowers, and it's easy cycling, and you're blasting along, and you just have this big grin on your face, and then you emerge at the end of that into the abandoned Roman town of Capara. It's just a huge archaeological site with a big Roman arch, and you after having that beautiful ride, you put your bike up against that Roman arch, and you take a picture, and it's just fantastic. There's another bit though, if I can have two special bits.
Definitely.
I was very nervous about, so I couldn't quite figure out whether it was going to be too tough or not. And it's where you cross the Cantabrian Mountains. It's quite easy to cross the Cantabrian Mountains because you're going from south to north, and you're already at about 600, 700 meters, and then you have to climb to about 1,200 meters, and then you descend almost to sea level on the other side. And we've done the road bit on our first trip, and I wanted to do the off-road bit, but I was just a bit nervous because it looked tough, and I got up there, and it was this fantastic Roman road which went right across the top of the Cantabrian Mountains. It was absolutely amazing. And because I was nervous about how tough it was, I wasn't sure what I was quite letting myself in for. I suppose it was a combination of relief that it was more than durable and the sort of stunning beauty of the trip. I had to then come down, of course, so you were 1,200 meters and you had to come down this very bumpy concrete road to get down to into the coastal plain. But that was a special day as well, really, really nice. That bit is just out of Leon, which is on the southern side of the Cantabrian Mountains. And Leon is my favourite city as well, so it's an absolutely beautiful city. My favourite city in all of Spain. So yes, special day. That was a special day.
You've painted such an incredible, almost a postcard of this incredible route that goes through these wonderful towns, and you have great food and accommodation. I know, just listening to you, this route, which has been on my bucket list for 20 years, is gone really, really a lot higher. And I'm thinking, how can we do this with our kids and our wife in the next couple of years? Because it sounds just like an ideal route. So I want to say thanks for coming on the show today, John, and sharing all this incredible information.
Pleasure.
If you want more inspiration, I'm going to put links to John's guidebook. You can buy it directly from Cicerone, which will save you a bit of money, or you can buy it on Amazon if you're just looking for a quick purchase. I'll also put a link to his website as well, where there's lots of great blog posts on there. And with that, thanks for listening to this episode of the 10 Adventures podcast. We'll be back next week to explore the world and hear about more epic adventures. Start planning your own adventure by visiting us at 10adventures.com and listen to other episodes of the 10 Adventures podcast on Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere else you find your podcasts.